first on my list.
Thanks very much, Chair. Certainly my comments probably will be out of kilter with many of the comments today, simply because we have 4 parties in the executive populating the majority of this committee, apart from Claire Sugden and myself. So if they can't be chair leaders for their own document, I don't know who else would be. But certainly over the last few days, the chair mentioned a detailed document. That would be one of my criticisms. It's certainly not detailed. There's plenty of pictures, plenty of nice words, but there's little in way of commitments, tangible commitments. I can turn around and say, in 2 years' time, this is what's happening in each of the departments. But there is a couple of them that I do want to pick out in the spin document. So, in the chamber, I had asked the First Minister, we'll concentrate on childcare first of all. So in your document, it talks about a 25 million commitment, and for your exact wording, we are investing up to 25 million this year. Sounds good. The First Minister said it was 50 million when she was speaking in the early parts of the debate, and the Deputy First Minister failed to take me up on, give me the commitment, give me the reassurance. What is the actual figure? So childcare is talked about and mentioned 30 odd times in this document, so it's heralded as one of the big delivery projects for this executive. What is the figure? Is it the 25 million that we have in the document? Is it the 50 million that the First Minister said? But what seems to be clear is it's not the 57.2 million figure that this executive has been provided by the Westminster Government to deliver childcare strategy.
So if I could maybe, Chair, refer to page 9 on the PFG. I think the document explains that the 25 million has been invested already, so that's the 25 million. I think the remainder of the 50 million is future investment.
I think the 25 million was ring fenced for 24-25 spend, and the 50 million is what I think is the anticipated allocation for the 25-26 year, so both amounts should be spent on childcare.
Why doesn't this document reflect the 50 million? Because going by 25 million, it appears to be a year out of date.
This is telling us what we've done for this year.
We are investing up to 25 million this year.
Yeah. So
we're in March 2025.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to know really what we've done last financial year. I want to know what we're doing next financial year.
Well, I think Louise is right. So there's an amount of money which is 50 million, which has been provisionally allocated, but the budget is still out to consultation, so that needs to be resolved. So the consultation closes next Thursday, the 13th, and then the budget will be settled. That's my understanding of how those two figures come into play.
Use a term that's as clear as mud might be certainly too positive towards that response. So what you're telling me is the 25 million referred to in this document is what was paid, what was spent last year, and next year it's 50 million.
25 million is the year we're in.
Yeah. So there's 3 weeks left of that year, and we've only been given this document 2 days ago. So
the 25 million referred in here doesn't start at the point of the PFG. It's referencing what's already been done in that space by way of investment this year.
So there's no mention of next year's commitment?
No.
So even taking next year's commitment of 50 million, where's the other 7.2 million that was provided to Stormont for childcare?
I would have to come back to you on that. I'm not sure about that.
I think it's important that if we're going to herald childcare as one of the big deliveries of the executive, when there is a cheque from Westminster of 57.2 million that has been provided, and we know that through table questions, it's important we understand how much of that Stormont is using for the intended purpose and how much of that has been spent on other things. And if there is money being spent on other things, I would like to know what the executive prioritises more than childcare. For that's the reason that money was provided. So when you're coming back next week, I certainly would like to know clarity on the figure. Like, I would expect if we're spending 50 million next year, that at least to be in here and having one of these these buzzwords of up to 50 million that they like to use, instead of relying on a figure that's going to be relevant for another 3 weeks. If we move on to the next one I want to cover then is policing, and I take you to page 49. So this is one that the Deputy First Minister did come back on, and there's summons up, and it talks about a sufficient number of police officers in line with New Decade New Approach commitments. That was a number of years ago. Why don't we have a figure in here? And going by the Deputy First Minister's response, if she is claiming that we have to cross-reference the programme for government with other documents, I think that's folly. But going along that train of thought, does that mean, I think, if we 6,300 police officers at the minute, does that mean that by the end of this mandate, this programme for government is committing us to recruit a further 1,200 police officers?
Well, that's probably a question more for the Justice Department than for us in TEO, but I take the point that people want clarity on that. But there's an ongoing conversation between the Chief Constable and Department of Justice about what that number should be.
Yeah, you understand from my point of view, so this is the executive document.
Mm-hmm.
This seems to be an executive document produced in the Executive Office, and those outside of the DUP and Sinn Féin were given crumbs at the last minute to say, here's your information, this is what we're running with. But surely if this commitment is within this brochure, within this glossy book, there must be some thought given that, right, we're making this commitment, we're not going to put 7,500 into the document to commit to it, but the Deputy First Minister has referenced me to go and read another document which does commit to 7,500. So on that basis, my reading would be we're going to have 1,200 new police officers, because that is what the executive is committed to. There's no use, like, Neil Long signatures on this book, absolutely, but this is a collective executive commitment here. So surely you're best placed to answer my query, because this is what the executive committed to.
Could I come back on a couple of points, if I may, please?
Yeah.
I wouldn't agree that it was crumbs at the last minute for other parties and executive ministers. This has been an iterative process, and it's involved a lot of cross-departmental working at official level. It's involved ministerial engagement. So I couldn't agree with your categorisation of it, Mr. Gaston, forgive me. In terms of, yes, it is an executive document, but it's a TEO produced document, but it's an executive agreed document. Ms Long has put her name to this, and if we need more clarity on the police figures, I can ask that question.
Yeah.
But
I think that's very important, and especially with the Deputy First Minister and her response, that's almost what has been claimed. And I take your point about those outside the two main parties, crumbs, and I would expect you to stick up for them. But moving then to a department where that suggestion has come from, namely Health, and Mr Nesbitt, who has been very vocal in the media, saying that the first he had seen of this was when he was given the draft. Now, the Deputy First Minister did say today, well, this is actually Mr Nesbitt's wording that has been included here. But if we do make the journey across to Health, page 31, on Tuesday in the Chamber, I took the opportunity with the Finance Minister. So when he was making his announcement, yes, the programme for government was debated on Monday, he was making his announcement about the extra 61 million going to health for transformation and doing things differently. So it's up to 135 million is the colourful language in this document. What does that mean? Does that mean anything between £1 and 135 million can be heralded as a success simply because you haven't committed to what that will actually be. Does that mean that 135 million is an aspirational figure, and on that basis, Mike, you need to now go and find that because that's what you said you've needed? The Health Minister has said that the 80 million that's listed in here, he has found within his budget already. So that's not new money, essentially. That's rolling out a commitment as Health Minister that he has already taken off his income and budget. So going back to the 135 million, what is the plan of how we get to that figure? Because it's important when you put a figure like that into the public domain, into this document. And I presume that's not last year's figure, like childcare, this is a figure going forward. Where's that money coming from?
So that text on page 30 sits under a title target for 2027. I mentioned that the budget is out for consultation, and that's how that figure will be thought about in the context of the budget settlement. I agree with you. If it came in at £1, then nobody's going to think that's a success, so that is not going to happen. The Health Minister would not have sanctioned a figure of 135 unless that's what he's actually getting close to looking for. So
I think in his defence, that's the figure he needs. And going by what we heard and talked back earlier, that's the figure he's been asking for. But where I'm going with this is, he says he's under-resourced. There's a figure of 135 million. Where is that money going to come from? Is this the hedge room that was built into the budget for all the departments? Is that where they're going to try and suck this money from? If it's a collective decision, well, the gauntlet's then thrown down to other ministers of, you give us your hedge room if you want to deliver on this target.
It will come through the budget process, but I just want to reassure you that that wording is health wording. That wording also appears in the elective care strategy. So it's a serious statement by the Health Minister that that's what he needs. My ministers have met with the Health Minister. They're absolutely clear that he will have their assistance with health reform, and they'll continue to give him that commitment. They're absolutely clear that they want to play a role in helping the Health Minister make these reforms work. But I can't say anything to you today about 135 million is guaranteed. That's a budget process, but that's coming to the end of the consultation. But my ministers accept that this is an important piece of narrative by the Health Minister, and that's how it's in the programme for government by agreement.
I say we've